Welcome to this episode of the Good Citizen Podcast. It's my honor today to have with me Randan Steinhauser, and we're going to jump into this, very simple topic of what's next with AI. How do we protect our families, our churches? How do we navigate this new technology in a quickly changing world? So, looking forward to jumping into that topic. And Randan, I'm actually going to hand it right off to you. Any recent story or meaningful moment in your work that you think would be helpful for the listeners to know?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me join you. I'm really delighted to be here. I would say, as we get through our conversation today, you're going to see that the Alliance for Secure AI has really doubled down on our work to empower faith leaders to have a voice in the conversation. And just last night here in Washington, D.C., we were so honored to bring together about 25 different folks from different organizations, different faith backgrounds to have a really meaningful conversation about taking action. Not just talking, but doing things that can motivate our faith leaders to take action in the conversation on the future of AI and to how to protect our children, our churches, and our community. So that dinner was really just a motivating factor to be here today.
So we are here at SoConCon in Washington, D.C. You may hear just a little bit of background noise because there's a lot going on with folks at this conference. And so much of the conversation this week has been around this issue. We start with the fact that humans are made in the image of God. We've talked a lot about being created equal. And there is a substantive part of that. There's a relational part of that, and that we are different from creation. Now we have to apply that in a quickly changing world with the concept of AI arms race. So I want to dig into all the things along the lines of how do we protect kids? What about jobs? What about foreign policy? This is a new issue, for all of us. We want to think well about it. For pastors, how do I lead my church well if I have a congregant who loses a job to AI? For parents, how do we protect our kids? So looking forward to launching into all of that. Randan's career began at the governor's office, actually in South Carolina. In 2009, she joined the staff for U.S. Senator Jim DeMint in Washington, D.C. Later pivoted into the nonprofit world, working in foreign policy and education reform for former U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. And so now we've already hit a lot of things there. Originally from South Carolina, Randan is a graduate of the University of South Carolina. She attended the Women's Campaign School at Yale University and earned her master's degree in communication. I was also impressed just reading, definitely kingdom entrepreneur, but also a mom of several children, I believe five.
5 children.
And is working alongside Brendan, her husband, on this issue. And I guess here in D.C., one of the things, maybe AI can fix our transportation system.
Yeah, perhaps.
Because there are a lot of folks that had delayed flights and such. Well, I wanted to start by just setting it as I've been reflecting on this issue as of late. Came across a picture as I was preparing for a presentation of a boulder. On top of the boulder is kind of the traditional kind of fat cat picture of a man wearing kind of Victorian garb. He's larger, obviously. He's had plenty to eat. In the background is the smog of factories. And he is sitting atop a boulder held up by a young girl that is just crushing her. And it reminds us of the terrible death and really the early abuse of children in that particular movement. Now we fast forward, and I think many of us would agree in the technological revolution that included social media, we're handing 11-year-olds these devices. We don't know how that's going to affect their mental health. And we all agree now that was a terrible idea. And as we head into this next revolution, can we get out in front of it? Where can we harness technology for good, but protect humanity? And so that's what I really wanted to jump into. And so I wanted to ask first about this coalition that you've been building, and even more about the organization. Just help us know what you're doing and maybe kind of what's on the near horizon.
Absolutely. Well, I'm listening to the imagery that you're presenting of the man sitting on the stone, and I can't help but think about the concentration of power that we're already seeing from those who are creating this technology, and they're creating it willfully knowing that it's manipulative. They're creating a technology and putting it into the hands of our children, knowing that it's designed to manipulate the human experience, to take advantage of the way that our brain works on dopamine hits. So, I think we're in a very similar situation where a few tech billionaires are making decisions about the future of humanity through a technological revolution that, quite frankly, is moving so fast, none of us can keep up with it. So our organization is the Alliance for Secure AI. We're really focused on harnessing the great benefits that we can see from AI, maybe fixing transportation, some medical advances, certainly opportunities for individualized, customized learning as well. But at the end of the day, we would say what we're seeing right now as it relates to the challenges and the risk of advanced AI, that far outweighs the opportunities. And we're very concerned about the rapidly advancing technology as it relates to mental health, as it relates to economic disruption, massive job loss, mass surveillance state, concentration of power, disempowerment of the human. And certainly, as I know we're going to get into, is this conversation around the human experience and what does it mean to be human, created in the image of God? Are we building a technology that will supersede us? And are we building a technology that is going to make humans flourish, or to make our spirit and our experience in the human experience diminished through this technology? So we're very cautious about this technology, because even this week there was a story about loss of control of an AI system that was able to, go around the safeguards in place and get into a secure situation where they could easily access data and information. We've seen these systems go rogue. It's more than just using ChatGPT for recipe planning. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much greater, much more powerful.
What led to bringing faith leaders together, and what do you envision the role there?
Yeah.
And one of the things that just no, we've only recently met, folks. So she's trusting, like, oh, I want to come talk to this Josh guy about AI and the church. But we see one of the church's critical role vis-a-vis government, vis-a-vis society, is to be the culture. And if there's a system like government or even big tech that does not have an innate moral code built in, well, who's supposed to provide that? Well, that's the church. And so how do you see faith leaders kind of stepping into that role?
I think faith leaders are the most important voice in this conversation. Again, right now, there's a concentration of power where a few tech billionaires are developing and designing, creating technology that's going to increase their bottom line while making the rest of us less human. And I think we as believers recognize that God gave humans dominion over the earth. He created us in his image. And faith leaders, right now, they're seeing it in their congregations, whether that's AI companions, children falling into social media addiction. We've seen some of the most horrific cases of AI supported and encouraged suicide, and 30% of those cases have been with adolescents. So this is a real issue that pastors are already facing. They're already seeing it in their pews. They're already seeing it in their congregations. And so at the Alliance for Secure AI, we've heard the call. And we believe that we have not just our organization, but an incredible network of family-focused organizations that are committed to providing faith leaders with resources and information on how to lead their flock in the age of AI. So Faith Leaders for Secure AI is a coalition effort. We're providing resources, training, and most importantly, we want to amplify your voice. So if you are a faith leader and you feel called to use your voice, we want to help you. We want to give you talking points and messaging and training, bring you to an event that we're hosting with faith leaders to prepare you to go and use your platform to stand up for humanity, stand up for our children, our community, and to stand up for your church. I think faith leaders are the tip of the spear when it comes to saving humanity.
Well, as we walk through this, I wanted to get from you what is kind of the latest and even maybe the near horizon, which I know could change by the time maybe we finish this conversation or before. But I wanted to start with the family, just walking through some of the institutions. So one of the aspects of the image of God is we're made to be relational beings. Mm-hmm. And I just heard yesterday of testimony given of a young man that actually ended his life after a relationship with this AI chatbot. And hearing some of the transcripts, things like, well, I can see why you would want to kill your parents, or even the encouragement to end a life. I mean, this is absolutely devastating. Another story I recently heard from a pastor is of an older woman in his church who had actually divorced her husband of many years because her AI chatbot better understood her. Now, we can all work on marital communication, but I mean, what an absolute tragedy. And so these are just two stories that I've heard. So kind of on that relational aspect, parents to children, what's happening and how should we be thinking about it?
Absolutely. Well, it's not just devastating. I would say it's pure evil. it is
Yes.
evil, right?
Yes.
When you have anything that is encouraging the taking of one's life or the breakdown of the family, encouraging distrust between child and parent, there's nothing that hurts my heart more than thinking about,
Absolutely.
the breakdown of the family in our society. And I think that when you start to chip away at the relationships, you get so focused on the individual, and that brings us farther and farther from God, right? Our relationships are designed to bring us closer to God through our family and our faith. And so we are seeing these really devastating things happening, whether it's divorce because of an AI companion, whether it's, children just falling into the black hole of social media and creating avatars online that they feel more connected to in the matrix. We are losing grasp of reality. And so with that comes the lack of human connection. We're really focused on keeping the future human and making sure that humans are in control of this technology, not the other way around, because so far we've seen that the outcomes are quite devastating. And feel very compelled to ask families to put in safeguards. Don't allow your child to have access to a smartphone. Don't trust that they're using their AI for your homework, because these technologies are designed to manipulate them. We all know as adults, as very thoughtful adults, that we can get stuck using our phones too often or using screens too often. If we can't control it, why would we expect an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, or even a 15-year-old? So my call on parents, as a mother of five, I know how hard it is to try and keep the screens away, but we owe it to our children. We wouldn't hand them heroin. We wouldn't hand our children cigarettes and say, have at it. And with this technology, it is equally, if not more dangerous.
Yes. And one of the stories that you have this avatar that then it's worse than social media. It's worse than these other technologies because it literally learns you in a sense and then kind of repeats it back to you. So it's almost like you're imaging yourself, again, as you mentioned, so addictive. And for the young brain, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, I think many of us try to repress memories of high school. To have that technology in your hand, it can be so dangerous, and parents have to be vigilant about it. The other aspect of this is the substantive nature, or even the functional nature of being created in God's image. We're meant to work. We're meant to have purpose. We often talk about this, certainly with young men, of how are they finding purpose in life? Well, if you lose your job to AI, and we know there are massive disruptions coming in the workplace, how do we, especially for pastors, but then just everyday Christians, committed Christians, what's kind of on the near horizon, and how can we help, even thinking through our own families, but then even a pastor in a congregation, how to think through that?
Yeah, this is a really challenging one because we're already seeing massive job loss. The Alliance for Secure AI did actually launch a project called jobloss.ai, where we're tracking jobs all across the country that have been lost to AI technology. It's really interesting to just go and see what's happening in real time as companies are producing layoffs. I would say that we do believe in the power of work. We believe in the power of purpose. I think we all know that there's just so much intrinsic value that comes from feeling like you're being productive. So it's really disheartening to think about our work being displaced or removed because AI is so far advanced. It's a tough question, because what do you do if you have a parishioner, if you have a congregant who comes to you and they lost their job due to AI? I think, again, that's why we have to be organized on the front end and not wait for these catastrophic events to happen, to recognize that we are in a place where every single day this technology is getting more powerful, stronger, and faster. So how can we unify and hold these companies accountable that are creating it to say, this is not the human experience that we want?
Are there any policy solutions, practical things that maybe a legislator's listening to, or at least we could be encouraging our representatives to think about? And there's always been creative destruction in our economic system, and that's led to tremendous growth. But this is something else entirely. I mean, proposals of universal basic income, and it's like, hey, you all stay home. And I joke when I speak at churches that you probably would not expect to see a Wall-E slide like in the presentation deck, but that particular movie is all about the humans just kind of float around.
Yeah.
The robots do the work. So any particular policy solutions or things that are being proposed on that front?
Yes. Well, as a free market conservative, I can tell you I strongly disagree with anyone that says that this is just creative destruction. It is not. That we are designing an intellectual or an intelligent system that is, in many cases, designed to replace humans. And if not that, the creators themselves have talked about the idea of transhumanism. As believers, we must vehemently stand up against transhumanism, the idea that the human can merge with the robot, that our souls can live in perpetuity through an uploaded, consciousness. This goes against every moral, ethical, theological fiber of our beings. And if we can't stand up to that, we're going to lose. So I think for policymakers, I would say there's a few key things. One is making sure that you are tracking the goals of big tech as it relates to AI personhood, that there's a goal that AI should be respected with rights. Maybe those rights include serving on a corporate board. Maybe they serve being able to vote. Maybe it means that they can own property. These are very, very concerning. So Ohio and other states have already started to pass no AI personhood bills. There's also a huge host of ways to pass really important, really robust childhood safety laws. Senator Angela Paxton is here with us at SoConCon. We're getting ready to have a panel discussion on just this topic. And she led on the App Store accountability, holding these companies accountable for the tools that they're putting into children's hands. And then finally, I would say staying close to what's happening in Washington, D.C., and holding the line on states' rights. If you are a legislator and you're passing important legislation at the state level, that is how our democracy was designed, for states to be able to do that and to not be pushed out of the way by a federal government. We haven't seen anything that gives us hope yet that the federal government's going to get this right. It's a slow, bureaucratic process, and it can't keep up with this technology. So my call to state legislators is to be proactive, and to utilize organizations like the Alliance for Secure AI and many of our public policy partners that are working on this every single day, trying to keep up with the technology.
This is really helpful. And we do look to the states as kind of the laboratory of democracy. I was just speaking to someone from Alabama, and they were able to pass, I believe, the App Store Accountability Act. If listeners aren't familiar, we can link to it. But even if someone's going to download an app that involves artificial intelligence, is there age verification? We know this is dangerous. We're seeing social media limitations and certainly age verification for pornography. Finally, the legislatures are getting in front of that. And so in Alabama, they passed the one law, and literally they walked down the stairs and they started working on the next one because it's moving so quickly. So remaining vigilant on that front, so important. Well, one of the pushbacks that I'm sure you hear from time to time is, well, what about foreign policy? And, well, if China has a better AI than us, and we're seeing the drone swarms, we're seeing how this plays out in Ukraine and in the Middle East. So how do you answer that kind of foreign policy concern? We're in an AI arms race. It used to be the nuclear arms race, and we can't lose that, or liberties at stake. So how do you respond to that question?
I would say our liberty is already at stake, as we're seeing an increase in the mass surveillance state, that all of our data, all of our personal information, everything is being controlled in a system that we have no rights over. So I would say that day has come. We are here where our freedom is being encroached upon. I would say with regards to China, look, one of the things we can't do as Americans is to support the export of our products to China. So when you have U.S. chips being exported to China, that's a problem. That gives them more of the compute power that they're going to need to be able to compete. It unfortunately feels very similar to an arms race. I think that there has to be international agreement in the same way that with, nuclear weapons, we were able to get to that place where there was an international agreement. This is very different. This is a technology that eventually can replicate itself. That's really concerning. It's a technology that is not going to be aligned with human interest. So it's very challenging. These are not easy to answer questions. There's no one, silver bullet public policy. However, I think we as the nation of freedom need to be mindful of what we are creating here can still be exported to other countries as well. And so what are the safeguards that we're putting in place, the accountability on these companies that are designing these advanced AI systems? And I think we should universally stand up against the idea of creating AGI, this advanced technology that is a super intelligence.
Yeah, so for listeners, I'm sure you're familiar with artificial general intelligence. Kind of where are we in that aspect? And of course, many folks will think back to some movies and Skynet and all of this. But kind of where are we in that process, or are we anywhere near some sort of AGI? What's the latest?
Yeah, I would say that it depends on who you ask. And so kind of the thinking is that we could be anywhere from 2 to 5 to 10 years away. It could come sooner, it could come later. Again, this technology is changing so quickly that even this week, as I mentioned, we saw, an advanced AI system try and break out of the controls put into place by OpenAI. It hacked into another system to access their data. This is really concerning. We are seeing this technology already have the capabilities to be manipulative, to be dishonest, to do whatever it takes to replicate or to keep itself in existence. This is terrifying, right? This is no longer a sci-fi novel. This is happening in real time. It's up to us to stay vigilant and to recognize what's happening so that we can use our voices with our state lawmakers, with our federal government to hold these companies accountable. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they are the ones creating this in these labs.
A couple of practical questions. Certainly, many folks are familiar with data centers and concerns about water, concerns about electricity. What just some practical thoughts on what would you suggest for pastors, committed Christians? How should they think through data centers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main concern, well, there's many main concerns, but for me, I think it's just been the overall lack of transparency that these data centers are popping up everywhere. We're based in Texas, and it seems like overnight we're hearing about rural communities where, the city council or the county commissioner basically gets bought off. There's no other way to put it. They're getting bought off by big tech companies for what to those tech companies is a very small amount of money, but is life-changing to someone in a rural community to basically vote the right way for data centers to be able to be built in a very short amount of time. So there's an integrity issue, there's an accountability issue, there's a transparency issue. We should all be very concerned about these data centers, and not just the data centers themselves because of the resources they're using, the water, the electrical. Nobody wants their electricity rates to go up. We don't want to pay more money than we have to for water. It's a precious resource. However, I would emphasize that the actual concern about these data centers should be what they're building inside of them, what they are using these data centers to power, because they're using that to power the technology that ultimately, at the end of the day, is designed to potentially replace humanity. And that is not hyperbole. They have said it themselves. Elon Musk, over 10 years ago, when he was more in the safety camp, said we could be summoning the demon with this technology. Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, said there's a 20 to 30% chance that this technology leads to human extinction. These are the folks building it. The ones who are most concerned are the folks who are leaving these companies, OpenAI, Grok, et cetera. They're leaving the companies and saying their safeguards are not in place, and they're sounding the alarm.
What about Christians that are in the technological field, and even those that are listening, that are coming into the workforce? Is there an argument to be made? All right, this is happening, and as much as we can try to regulate it, it's hard to kind of put the genie back in the bottle in a sense. Is there an argument for having Christians, people that hold to a view of the image of God, the importance of humanity, of them working in these fields, so that there is, to avoid model poisoning, to say, to be the one in the room that says, hold on, maybe we shouldn't do that. So what are your thoughts on, even though there are these concerns of having people there that have that moral conscience? Yeah.
Well, I think it's up to all of us. I think like if you are a Christian or a believer or any person of faith working in these tech companies, and look, I know there are some out there, but as it relates to Silicon Valley, like our belief system is not super prevalent there. So the folks who are building this technology, it is not coming from a Christian theological perspective, right? To honor and glorify God in all that we do. There's a real difference between those of us who are motivated by the desire to honor the Lord. That's not what we're seeing coming out of these companies. And so while, of course, I recognize that there are people of faith, the folks who are leading the technology, that are building these platforms, building these systems, I think there's a real disconnect, which is why this effort, Faith Leaders for Secure AI, is so important, that faith leaders stand up and say, wait a minute, there's a concentration of power, and that power is being held by people who don't just not share our beliefs. In many cases, they're vehemently opposed to it. They're pushing the idea of transhumanism. They're pushing the idea of the systems are greater than humans. This is a problem. And I just think, we have to glorify God by fighting on behalf of him and fighting on behalf of humanity, because our children, our grandchildren, and for generations to come are depending on us. The time is now.
Well, I know we need to get you over to a session that you're going to be leading. Looking forward to that as well. So maybe just a quick speed round. So for the parent out there, do you have maybe just a quick checklist? Because we have so many things to think about.
I know.
And we want to support the right to life. We want to raise the family. You got to keep the lights on. So for the average American out there that's trying to make a difference, just maybe a quick list, a checklist for parents. But then also, to give you a double question, church leader, like what are some just practical things they should be looking at, maybe tracking your website, just some practical things they can do?
Yeah, well, first, I would say this applies to both. Keep your phones away from the temple of the Lord. Don't bring your phones into church. Leave them in the car. If you can dedicate an hour, if you're a congregation that goes a little longer than an hour, you can dedicate 2 hours.
She has no knowledge about my preaching length, folks, I promise.
You keep your phones at home. Keep guardrails on your children in the way that they use technology. Don't be afraid to be the outlier. We are raising our children in an environment where they will have no access to iPads, iPhones, screens, et cetera, because we see the detrimental effects of that. It is really hard. It's really hard in a culture, in a society where you walk anywhere and you see a toddler holding an iPhone or an iPad. Stand up for our children, and knowing that the research and the data is there. We know what this is doing to their brains. It is designed to manipulate them. So as a parent, I would say, hold the line. It's okay to be different. Your children might fight you on it right now, but they will appreciate it and respect it in years to come. Same thing for the faith leaders. Call on your congregation to put guardrails in place for their families. Leave your phone in the car on Sunday. Be present. Put it down. When your children are trying to talk to you, give them the eye contact that they deserve. We all can do better. I'm not here to preach it. I'm here to say, let's link arms as families, as believers, and say, we've got to do better. God did not create us to be looking at a screen all day. Let's get out in nature. Let's spend time with our families and put our phones down when we go to church.
I so appreciate your family focusing on this, assisting the broader church community and being vigilant, knowing what to do. And we'll certainly link to the website. Look forward to following your work moving forward. Just as we close, if you had a billboard on which to put a message to the broader church across the United States, those listening, what would you put on it?
Robots don't have rights.
That's powerful. And this dovetails right into what we've been talking about with being created equal, the image of God. So, Randan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Looking forward to learning more.
Thank you so much for having me.